Engraved, The Hunted Warrior by Y.V. Qualls. Chapter 1, Raiding Party. If this is my last sunrise, at least it's a good one. To the west, the sun's first rays were painting the mountain tops orange. Above him, wispy clouds were ablaze. To the east, the vast, rolling grasslands of the endless plains were silhouetted as the sun peeked over the horizon. Beautiful, Alam whispered to himself. I didn't know you felt that way, said a voice behind him. Alam turned his head and saw Tajar sitting with his blanket wrapped around his shoulders. Not you, idiot, the plains, smiled Alam as he sat up and wrapped his own woolen blanket around himself. He glanced around the camp. Are we the first ones up? No, Chief Urlock has walked to the river, and Sarek went to check the trail. Alam nodded. Sarek was the clan's scoutmaster. It was his job to find suitable caravans to raid. Alam reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a chunk of flatbread. He ripped it in half and threw to Jar the larger piece. Before taking a bite, he sent a silent prayer to the heavens. Please let us all return home in safety. As he ate, he started rolling up his blanket. When we get back home, I need a bigger mat and blanket, said Alam. I had to sleep curled up all night so my blanket would cover me. I knew it, said Tajar. Shh, you'll wake everyone, Alam hissed. I knew there had to be a drawback for you being so tall, Tajar pressed on. Other than always hitting your head when you enter tents, and being a slower runner, and being an easy target for archers, and looking ridiculous on horseback. Actually, just looking ridiculous in general. Alam doesn't look ridiculous, said another voice. Alam and Tajar turned to see Shale, propped up on her elbows. At least not all the time, she amended. Thank you, Shale, you're a big help, Alam replied. Did you sleep well? In a raiding party? Surrounded by snoring men? No, not at all. Actually, since you two are almost men, Alam smiled, maybe you can tell me, why do men snore so much more than women? Alam and Tajar shrugged their shoulders in unison. Come join us for breakfast, said Alam. He extended his piece of flatbread towards her. Sure, she said, as she gathered her blanket around her shoulders, picked up her saddlebag, and padded over to the two young men. But you keep your food, Alam. It's a kind offer, but I have my own. Alam shifted where he was sitting to allow space for her to sit next to him. Even so early in the morning, with messy hair and a face slack from sleep, she was still lovely. Her oval face, dark eyes, and heart-shaped lips were hard to stop staring at. Do you think Sarek will find a suitable caravan for us to raid? Alam asked. The chances are good, Tajar replied. This early in the spring, it's more likely that small, fast caravans will pass this way. Bigger ones will come when the weather is more settled, but they won't be any good for us. Hopefully a small one that we can scare into handing us their goods without any bloodshed is on the trail. I hope so, said Alam. Don't worry, Tajar put his arm patronizingly around Alam's shoulders. If it comes to fighting, I'll look after you. With your piddly arms? Alam pushed Tajar away. Tajar pumped his biceps and pulled back his tunic to reveal the muscles. These have captured the hearts of 1,000 women. Shale fanned herself with her hands. Oh, be still, my heart, such splendor, such magnificence. Alam laughed and pushed Tajar roughly to the ground. Yet, he had to admit that Tajar's physique was as close to ideal as a young man of around 20 summers could have. He was also more handsome than Alam, with bright, almond-shaped eyes, an infectious grin, and straight black hair, which he generally tied up in a simple bun near the back of his head, as was common among young warriors in their clan. As Alam, Tajar, and Shale ate their morning bread and joked with each other, the rest of the camp stirred to life. Food was eaten, sleeping mats and blankets were rolled up, and horses were groomed. By the time Sarek had returned from his scouting expedition, everyone was ready to ride. Sarek rode to Chief Urlock and exchanged a few quiet words. Chief Urlock nodded, then turned his horse to face the rest of the raiding party. Today is a good day, he shouted. A small caravan is moving towards us. They have armed guards, but we outnumber them. We'll use the valley to welcome them into our lands. Mount your horses and loosen your swords, for wealth and glory await us. You are brave, and I know you will all do your duty. Alam nodded in agreement. Protect the chief, protect the clan. As Chief Urlach passed Alam, Tajar, and Shaleh, he paused. Alam, you ride with me. Yes, Chief. Shaleh, you ride with Sarek and Tajar. But, Father, Shaleh started. No, you will be safer with them than with me. The chief kicked his heels into the horse's side and led the raiding party forward. I can fight, she called out. Yes, replied Chief Urlach over his shoulder. Right next to Sarek and Tajar. Alam looked at Shaleh and shrugged his shoulders. He then nudged his horse forward to take his place behind the chief. How big is the caravan? Alam asked Chief Urlach. 4 carts. Sarek says it looks like they are in a rush. Not that it will change anything. We're faster. Do you think it will come to blows? No. I have done raids like this many times. We outnumber them so much that they will have no choice but to agree to our terms. How many raids have you been in? This is my 5th, Alam answered. And how many have come to blows? Only the one where you broke that caravan driver's nose. Yes, Urlach snorted. He was a stubborn one. Chief Urlach looked at Alam and slowed his horse down. Even though it is unlikely that force will be needed, it is always a possibility. Therefore, a warrior must always be ready so that you are never taken unaware. You must be constantly vigilant. I understand, Alam said as Chief Urlach pushed his horse forward. The new season sandflies flitted from one piece of exposed skin to the next. It was hard to be still. Those are going to itch tomorrow, if I'm alive. The rock that Alam crouched behind barely concealed his lanky frame. He wiped strands of long black hair out of his face and peeked around the rock. There was still no sign of movement along the trail that lay a mere 10 paces away. On the hilltop above Alam, 3 archers lay in wait. On the opposite side of the ravine, another 3 archers hid in tufts of fresh spring grass. The bushes and rocks on either side of Alam concealed a further 12 warriors. This'll be easy. Nothing's going to go wrong. You look terrible, Alam, whispered Tajar from the cover of a shrub next to him. If you're going to wet yourself again, do it downwind, and preferably not while I'm around. Alam rolled his eyes in an attempt to look nonchalant, but inside his stomach was churning. Calm down, breathe. The first sounds of the approaching caravan bounced around the ravine. He shut his eyes in an attempt to steady himself. His heart doubled its pace. Our 5th raid, and you're still scared? Teased Tajar. I'm not scared, Alam lied. Then why is your face that odd shade of green? Shut it, hissed Chief Urlach a few paces away. Alam closed his eyes again and waited. The moments passed slowly. The air was still. Every hoof fall was amplified. The caravan was close enough for snatches of conversation to be heard from them. Still they waited. The first cart rolled alongside them. Finally, Urlach's bird call sounded. As one, the raiding party stood up with drawn weapons. Bowstrings tensed, swords flashed in the mid-morning sun. The trap was perfect. Shock and fear were written on the faces of the caravan. Ambush! Yelled a middle-aged man that rode a huge warhorse at the head of the caravan. Everything from his muscular build to his battered armor indicated that he was a warrior, a veteran. The caravan acted. The drivers of the carts pulled together. Their co-drivers lifted crossbows. The escort guards drew swords. Peace! Shouted Urlach as he calmly stepped forward with his hand in the air. Alam had no idea how the clan leader could be so steady. Why say you peace when you approach with drawn weapons? Replied the veteran. We want no bloodshed, smiled Urlach with confidence. We offer a simple trade. You have many supplies, we do not. We have many warriors, you do not. I propose that you hand us some of your provisions. In exchange, my warriors will let you live. I do not bargain with anyone at sword point, especially barbarians, spat the veteran. Now that was not nice, Urlach smiled, as if it were a game and he held all the dice, which he did. "I will handle this," said a man sitting in the front cart. All eyes swung to him. He wore a holy man's brown robes. He was past youth, but not yet old. He had a weathered look, with darkened skin, and a face prematurely wrinkled from squinting in the sun. "Excellent! Someone with sense," said Erlach. He walked towards the man. "Please tell your men to unload the goods, and you can—" "There will be no trade today, sir," interrupted the man in robes. "Let us pass. Our travels cannot be delayed. It is too important for us to suffer anyone to slow us down. Every moment of pause puts you, us, indeed the entire endless plains in danger." "I do not heed threats," replied Erlach, "especially made by someone outnumbered and surrounded. It will be much faster if you just—" "He will not listen!" cut in the holy man. "Ride on! Ride!" joined the veteran. The caravan riders whipped their horses into action. After the briefest moment of shock, Erlach shouted, "Archers, volley!" Madness erupted. Arrows rained down upon the caravan, unseating one of the drivers and injuring an escort guard. In return, crossbow bolts hurtled upwards toward the hilltop snipers. Alam watched in frozen horror as Bakar, a boy on his first raid, looked down at the bolt feathers sticking out of his chest. He tumbled to the valley floor where he landed less than 5 paces away. Alam had known Bakar his whole life. He had an amazing way of imitating bird calls. He would never whistle again. His legs and arms were bent at horrible angles. "Alam, move!" shouted Tajar from in front of him. Alam tore his eyes from Bakar's twisted form and took stock of the battle. He had frozen, but for how long he knew not. Each of the 4 carts were the scene of a small clash, as clan raiders struggled with cart riders. Erlach and the veteran were exchanging blows. A handful of people already lay on the ground. "Push on!" screamed the holy man. He swung a thick wooden staff that hit a clan member and knocked him to the ground. Alam looked for Shaleh. She was alive and fighting near Tajar. Thank the heavens. Alam sprinted towards Erlach and the veteran. Protect the chief, protect the clan. Above him, another crossbow bolt found its mark. A clansman tumbled down the cliff. Alam did not look to see who it was. On the cart to his right, Shaleh finished off the driver of the second cart. In front of him, Erlach ducked beneath the veteran's sword swipe and jabbed his spear. It slid off the man's shield. Alam raised his axe. He allowed the fury to flow as Erlach had taught him. He let out a primal scream and threw himself at the veteran. Before his blow found its mark, his vision unaccountably doubled, then tripled. Everything split into multiple pieces, like an image in a broken mirror. Uncontrollable dizziness hit him. All sense of up and down, left and right were gone. He tumbled to the ground. Through fractured vision, he saw Chief Erlach collapse in front of him. A second later, the veteran tumbled heavily from his saddle. His horse fell moments later. 20 paces beyond the squealing horse, the fractured lines of Alam's vision converged. The spot of their convergence was impenetrably blurry. Looking at it made Alam nauseous. And then, as suddenly as his vision shattered, it healed. But in place of the convergence, 6 men were now standing. Magic. He had heard legends of magic and had always wanted to see it. Until now. Everything about the 6 men spoke of death. 5 of them wore vicious-looking armor decorated with spikes. They were painted with what could only be blood. Their blades dripped brown liquid. In the middle of them stood a man with a shaved head and loose-fitting maroon robes. He held a large book in his hands and was reading aloud. Alam could not understand the words. Around the valley, people picked themselves up and turned to the newcomers. The bald man lowered the book and addressed the holy man on the cart. "My liege has sent me for the box. Hand it to me now." "No," came the reply. "These people need not die today," said the bald man as he dropped the book. "Better to die than hand it to you." "As you wish." The bald man thrust his open hands towards the holy man and shouted. The holy man arched his back and cried out in pain. Smiling, the bald man advanced. Slowly, as if fighting some great resistance, the holy man raised his wooden staff. He thrust it towards the sorcerer. The sorcerer was pushed back by an unseen force. His smile became a frown. Suddenly, Erlach was at Alam's shoulder. "Up! Run! This is not our fight!" He dragged Alam to his feet. "Pull back!" he shouted to the rest of his warriors. Alam ran. In front of them, Tajar and Shale threw themselves behind the rocks that had concealed them moments ago. Alam slid next to them and looked back at the battle. 4 of the blood-covered knights fought caravan guards, who were clearly no match to them. The 5th lay dead before the veteran's feet. The veteran pulled his sword out of the dead man. Without a moment's hesitation, he charged towards the sorcerer. He shouted a battle cry as he ran. Alam had seen this kind of charge before. On a hunting trip, he, Tajar, and Tajar's father had disturbed a bear. Tajar's father ran towards it to save the 2 boys. It was the charge of someone who knows he is about to die, but has accepted his fate. The sorcerer bellowed strange words. His hands rolled around each other. The veteran's sword arm snapped like a twig, though nothing touched it. His arm swung limp. Still he charged. Another sickening crack sounded, and his leg gave way beneath him. He tumbled to the dirt. "For the love of all that is good, help us!" screamed the holy man to Urlach. Maybe it was the fury. Maybe it was sympathy. Maybe it was just stupidity. Whatever the reason, Alam jumped to his feet and rushed towards the bald sorcerer. "Alam, get back!" shouted Urlach. Alam did not respond. He gripped his axe firmly in both hands and screamed. In front of him, the sorcerer stepped closer to the veteran. With a bellow of exertion, he clutched his hands into fists and yanked them apart as if ripping something. The veteran's torso twisted. The armored man cried out as he crumpled to the ground. The sorcerer swung his head to look at the archers above. He grabbed the air with both hands. Shouting again, he pulled his hands back. 2 archers fell, their arms flailing around uselessly as they dropped. Alam was only 10 paces away. He raised his axe to strike. The sorcerer swung towards Alam and moved his hands into fists while muttering. Alam's muscles seized up. His legs stopped working mid-stride. He fell hard to the ground. Pebbles scraped his face. He braced himself for the pain that would end his life. It did not come. Instead, his vision went dark, blacker than night. Gradually, he became aware, over the pain of his clenched muscles, of the sounds of battle. He could not be sure if seconds or minutes were passing. He heard, as if it were from a great distance, the familiar sounds of Urlach, Tajar, and Shale's voices. He heard the clash of metal on metal and the horror of people crying in pain. But it was far away, as if in a dream. The sounds faded, and as they did, so did his hopes and will. They were disappearing into a calm acceptance of nothingness. There was a peace in death. We must all die. Today is as good as any other. But my friends need me. Subtly, incredibly subtly, he perceived a movement in the darkness. Not with his eyes, the blackness was absolute. The movement was emotional. The darkness seemed pleased. Alam concentrated what little willpower he had left and focused on the darkness itself. Realization dawned on him. It was like a cloud between him and himself. It seemed as if it possessed some will of its own. "Get out of me!" The darkness moved. "Get out!" It wavered. Weak gray light became visible. With renewed hope, he concentrated on moving his legs. His toes responded. The pain was excruciating, but they responded. He tried again. His feet moved. "Get out of me!" Focusing on his hand, he bent all his will to unclenching his burning muscles. They responded, and as they did, the darkness lessened. He moved his arm, and then his shoulder. The darkness was vanishing. He bellowed as he pushed at the ground with his good arm. The darkness fled from him, leaving his muscles sore, but his body full of adrenaline. Light flooded his vision, making him blink. The battle was bad. Very few people were still standing. Chief Urlach and Sarek were circling a blood knight. His sword was coated in blood. Shale and a couple of other clansmen darted around the only other standing blood knight. He savagely swung his blade back and forth. The sorcerer had his back to Alam. He was closing in on the holy man who was bleeding and convulsing on the ground. Clenched in his arm was a small, black, wooden box. Alam knew he would only have one chance. He sprang at the sorcerer with a cry, but his legs did not have the strength he expected. He collapsed onto one knee just short of his target. The sorcerer spun on him. Shock was on the man's face. "How did you—" Instead of finishing his question, he pointed at Elam's heart, squeezed his hand to a fist, and twisted it. Unbelievable pain exploded in Elam's chest. Elam dropped his grip to the end of the axe handle to give it more reach. "How are you alive?" the sorcerer whispered. He might have been alive, but Elam knew he was dying. He gathered his remaining strength and swung his axe. It embedded in the man's chest with a wet thunk. The pain lifted. He yanked it free. The sorcerer stepped back in shock. Again, Elam swung the axe, and again it struck his chest. Blood was everywhere. On the axe, spraying the dirt, covering Elam, gushing out of the man's chest. The sorcerer fell lifeless to the ground. Fire in him, Elam looked for another foe. "Boy," croaked the holy man in the dust. "Please, help." Elam read the desperation in the man's eyes and felt his rage disappear. Without it, he was suddenly tired and sore. "Please," the man implored. Elam knelt beside him. He knew there was nothing he could do for the man. There was too much blood. "You're going to be fine," he lied. Take it to Clarisai. To Clarisai." He held the black box towards Elam. "Clarisai? Where is Clarisai?" "Promise me," he croaked. "But I don't—" "Promise!" He propped himself on one elbow and with his free hand gripped Elam's shoulder. Their eyes locked. "Morcham can't have it," the holy man urged. "Why?" "Slaughter. Please. My life's purpose." A sensation of warmth radiated from where the holy man's hand gripped Elam's shoulder. Feelings that were not his own flooded into Elam. Exhaustion, kindness, despair. But strongest of all was urgency. "Who are you?" Elam asked. "No one. Take it to Clarisai. Do it for those you love." Elam looked past the man's brown irises, into the blackness beyond them, perhaps into his soul. "I promise," Elam vowed. And then the connection was gone. The holy man gurgled his last breath as his spirit left his broken body. Elam's gaze went to the box. It was exquisite, rectangular, as long as Elam's forearm, and as wide as his fist. It was made of a dark, fine-grained wood, almost black. It was bound in brass and beautifully engraved with light, intricate leaf and floral patterns. No lid, hinges, or lock were visible. He carefully took it out of the dead man's hands. The world changed. Color was gone and everything blurred. Elam felt cold. Somewhere close, an infant was crying. "What's going on?" Panic washed over him. The infant continued to cry. Out of the blurry haze, a woman's face drew right up to his. She looked disheveled, exhausted, and yet radiant. She was smiling as tears of joy ran down her cheeks. Elam felt cloth wrapped tightly around him. Some of the panic and fear subsided. The baby's crying softened. The woman said something to him, but Elam could not make out the words. She leaned in close and kissed him, on the forehead, the cheeks, his mouth, his neck. Realization hit him. He was seeing through the baby's eyes. As quickly as the strange vision started, it stopped. He was back on the battlefield. "What the hell is this?" He stared at the box. The sound of shouting and metal hitting metal drew his attention back to the conflict. He saw with relief that it was almost over. The final blood knight was surrounded, but refusing to yield. He thrust viciously, trying to make his way through the circle of clan warriors. He was tired. "Be patient," Chief Urlach instructed his warriors. Every thrust by the blood knight was slightly weaker than the one before it. Eventually, inevitably, he overextended, and Urlach slipped past his guard. Urlach gave him a swift death as befitted a warrior who had fought bravely to the last. "Tajar!" Elam suddenly realized he could not see his lifelong friend. "Tajar, where are you?" He scanned those that stood. Urlach, Shale, thank heavens she was unharmed, 3 archers on the hilltops, and 3 of the elder warriors. Fear rose in him, pooling in his stomach. He ran from one prone figure to the next until he found Tajar lying half under a cart. He had a swollen red welt above his temple. He stirred when Elam gently shook him. "Am I dead?" "Not yet," said Elam, smiling with relief. "Forgive my laziness. Being bashed with the shield brings out the worst in me." Urlach appeared at Elam's shoulders. "How is he?" "Fine," answered Elam. "He took a blow to the head, but his thick skull deflected it." "I'm glad you're well, Tajar," said Urlach. "You fought bravely today." "Thank you, Chief," Tajar replied with closed eyes. Urlach turned to Elam. "Is that the box they were arguing about?" "Yes, the holy man gave it to me," said Elam. "Let me see what is so important that attracts sorcerers from Morcham." "Brace yourself, Chief. When I touched it, I saw strange things. I think it is enchanted." Chief Urlach frowned and looked hesitant. Carefully, he took it from Elam. "Are you trying to scare me, boy?" he smiled. "No, Chief Urlach. Did you see nothing?" The chief shook his head. "I was telling the truth," Elam said as much to himself as to Urlach. Urlach suspiciously examined it. Nothing he, or anyone else, tried could open it. Shaking it showed that something was inside, something light, unlikely to be metal by the sound it made. But what it might be, no one could guess. When everyone had failed to open it, Urlach spoke to Elam. "The holy man may have given it to you, but I will keep it until I have decided what to do with it." Elam bowed his head in acceptance. Urlach then addressed what remained of the raiding party. "Well done to you all. You fought with honor and glory. You are all a credit to our clan. Soon we will retell what befell us today, but first we honor the fallen. After that we see what of value we can salvage from this raid. Then we go home." Engraved, The Hunted Warrior by Y.V. Qualls. Chapter 2, Journey Home. Urlach's raiding party was somber as it led the 4 captured carts south towards home. Elam silently drove one of the carts with Tajar at his side. The blow to Tajar's head was still affecting his balance, and thus he was unable to ride. Thunk. In his mind's eye, he saw his axe hit the sorcerer's chest. Blood covered it as it came out. There was fear on the man's face. Thunk. The axe fell again, and with it the sorcerer collapsed. More blood was on his axe. He died with his eyes and mouth open. He was a bad man. He deserved to die. What made him bad? He killed others and used foul magic. But I killed him. Does that make me a bad man now? Maybe. But I was protecting the holy man. Does that make me good and the sorcerer bad? I think so. Thunk. The axe hit the sorcerer's chest. Blood was on his axe as he pulled it out. He was a bad man. I did the right thing. What if he had a wife and children? Hello, Elam? Are you awake? Tajar nudged Elam's shoulders. Did you hear me? Sorry. My mind was wandering, replied Elam. Did it go anywhere interesting? No. What were you saying? Asked Elam. I was saying we should stay away from Urlach. He seems to be in a foul mood. Ahead of them, the clan chief was scolding one of the cart drivers. He certainly does, said Elam. It's to be expected, replied Tajar. Too many died in a raid that none should have. We had them outnumbered 2-1 and had better field position. They should have just given in to our demands. Do you think the box is the reason they refused us? Asked Elam. Well, it has to be, doesn't it? Agreed Tajar. Well, at least we'll come home richer. Elam felt a pang of guilt for trying to justify that the raid was worthwhile because of the treasures they claimed. Yes, concurred Tajar. But of the 18 warriors we left with, only 10 of us are returning. There will be some in the clan that will accuse Urlach of recklessness. But he wasn't, Elam said. No, you were. I really wish I hadn't been reckless, said Elam. You weren't reckless. You were crazy. You attacked a sorcerer, and somehow you actually killed him. Thunk. The axe embedded yet again in the sorcerer's chest. Elam felt the need to change subjects. Do you think Urlach will give you one of the chain shirts? He asked. I would actually prefer the sword that the old soldier had. It looks far better than anything else we took. Alam listened to Tajara's stream of conversation and prodded him with mundane questions to keep him going. Better that than his own thoughts. The last thing he wanted was to return to reliving the axe and the blood. The day's travel was slow. They headed south, following the meandering Bright Flow River. When light faded, the raiding party set up camp. Even though they were in the northern part of their own lands, there were still dangers that could beset them. Guards were chosen after a quick meal with no fire. Alam went to sleep early, knowing that he would be woken at midnight to join the watch. He fell asleep instantly. Alam was walking alone in a valley familiar, yet unfamiliar. No, he wasn't alone. Bakar was with him, talking of fishing. There was no time for fishing, for they must hide before the bald man saw them. But there were no places to hide. Too late. The bald man with maroon robes was in front of them, and next to him was Shaleh. He spoke to Alam and told him that Shaleh was his wife. The bald man put his arm around her shoulders and pulled her towards him. A patch of blood from the man's side touched Shaleh's wedding dress and stained it red. Bakar pushed him for no reason. Bakar pushed him again. And again. "Wake up, Alam," whispered Urlach, rocking his shoulders. He sat up quickly. Is it my watch?" "No, but you've been dreaming loudly. Come join me. Bring your blanket. There's still a touch of winter in the air tonight." Alam rose, covered himself with his woolen blanket, and hurried to catch up with his chief, who was pacing around the sleeping camp. "Today you took a life for the first time. Are you all right?" Urlach asked with care in his voice. "Why do you ask?" said Alam, wondering if the chief could read his thoughts. "I heard you talking in your dream. It sounded like a nightmare." "It was just a dream," said Alam. "Dreams fade with the sun." Urlach stopped pacing and looked directly at Alam. "Speak plainly to me." Alam bowed his head in shame. "I've killed fish and many animals for meat, but they haven't preyed on my mind like killing that sorcerer. All day, over and over, I've seen in my mind his blood on my axe and poor Bakar falling from the cliff. In my heart, I've started to see that I'm not made to be a warrior. I'm not tough enough. You, Sarek, even Tajara seem less affected than me. This was my 5th raid, and I still trembled like a leaf. You've taught me to fight, and for my body to be strong, but my heart is weak. I'm not brave like you, and I am ashamed to admit it." Urlach put a hand on Alam's shoulder and gripped him hard. Although Alam was taller than the chief, indeed taller than anyone in the clan, there was no doubt of the chief's strength. "Alam," he said, "throw away your shame. Every man or woman, at least those with a soul, are repulsed by taking the life of another human being. It is the natural order of things. If you were not affected, I would worry about you. Everyone here," he swept his hand around the camp, "that has taken a life has felt the same as you. Some vomit, some weep in private, some try to make light of it. But all of us have nightmares." "Even you?" Chief Urlach nodded. "Pim wakes me in the night before I start screaming, so I do not wake the whole clan. I've killed 5 people in my life. One was to protect Pim and Shaleh when the Kashbal clan raided us. Shaleh was but an infant at the time. One was punishment for someone who committed a crime in our own clan. 2 were this morning, and 1 was an old man from the east who refused to yield his cart to me. It was one of my first raids, and I was full of aggression. His is the death I regret most bitterly. I should have just let him pass and waited for the next caravan." "Why is it different from taking the life of a goat or a fish?" Alam asked. "I don't know," Chief Urlach said, "but it is." After a moment's silence, Urlach changed the subject. "What do you think we should do about the box?" "Why do you ask me?" asked Alam. "Well, first of all, I trust your instincts on what is the right thing to do. You seem to be drawn to doing the honorable thing, even when it gets you in trouble. And since I'm not sure what to do, I ask your advice." Alam was stunned. Never had Urlach asked his opinion about anything. "Secondly," continued the clan chief, "you say that the holy man gave it to you and told you to take it to—" "Clarisai," Alam supplied. "Where is that?" I do not know, said Erlock. The world is a big place, and I have seen little of it. Of course, Clarisai could be the name of a person rather than a place. Really, said Elam. I've never heard that name before. The world is full of strange names. Some might think your name is strange. But mine is so common, said Elam. Yes, but we've strayed from my point, which was that the holy man gave the box to you. After a lot of thought, I've decided that you should look after it. Erlock extended the box to Elam. Due to the darkness, Elam had not even been aware that the chief was carrying it. He hesitated to take it. But surely what belongs to me belongs to the clan, replied Elam as a way of stalling. He did not want to touch it again in case the blurry vision returned. Are you arguing with me? Chuckled Erlock. No, it's just that it could be very valuable. Or it could be a curse. Elam hadn't thought of that. Either way, continued the chief, I think you should look after it. Keep it on you always until we get home. Then we will gather the clan and discuss what to do with it. Elam took the box. Suddenly he was in a different place. Color vanished, leaving only black, white, and gray fuzziness. For a few seconds, the shock of the transformation bewildered him. Gradually, he became aware that he felt warm and happy. He relaxed. His stomach was very full, and he was tightly bound in a way that was reassuring. The same woman's face came closer. As she leaned over him and kissed his forehead and nose, her features became clearer. She was the most wonderful person he had ever seen. It had nothing to do with physical beauty. She was, quite simply, everything. As suddenly as it started, the vision ended. Elam staggered with the abruptness of the change. Elam, are you ill? Erlock grabbed Elam's forearm to steady him. The box gave me a strange vision. What was it? A mother and babe. Did you recognize them? No. And the strangest thing is that I was seeing through the baby's eyes. Chief Erlock, do you really think it might be cursed? Asked Elam. Who can tell? I do not know anything about magic other than it is best avoided. Is magic bad? I don't know. What about in the valley? Asked Elam. The bald man and the holy man. Erlock frowned. I've never seen anything like that before, and I hope I never will again. How the sorcerer snapped the limbs of that warrior without touching him is the stuff of nightmares. Yes, agreed Elam. Elam, there's one other subject I need to mention to you, said Erlock, his voice suddenly grave. He stopped walking and turned directly towards Elam. Yes? I know you are young, so I will be lenient. You disobeyed me today in the valley. I told you clearly that we would retreat, but you disobeyed and ran headlong into a fight outside of your ability. Don't do it again. Yes, my chief. Elam lowered his head in shame. From the camp, someone rose and walked towards them. It was Chalet. Daughter, what are you doing awake? Asked Erlock. You two woke me up, she replied. Go back to sleep, commanded her father. Your watch is the early morning one. I'm awake now, so I might as well stay up, she said, as if her father were merely suggesting it instead of giving an order. You go to bed, father. I'll keep watch with Elam. You and Elam watch the camp alone, in the dark? That will never happen, he said. Don't you trust us? Him I trust, Erlock replied, because he knows that I own a big sword and I'm happy to use it for castrations. You I don't trust at all. Father! Chalet tried to sound shocked. I will happily go back to bed, offered Elam with a smile. Good idea, said Chief Erlock. Wake up Arj. He can keep watch with Chalet since she is awake. But he smells like he hasn't bathed for a month, she complained. I think it was 2 months ago, said Erlock. But remember these words, daughter. A man does not have to smell good to be a good man. It certainly helps, though, muttered Chalet as Elam wandered back to the patch of ground that served as his bed. He fell asleep, imagining keeping watch with Chalet. It was a very nice thought. When Elam woke up the next morning, Tajar was preparing a few rabbits for breakfast. Erlock had permitted a fire to cook them. Have I slept in? Asked Elam. Not compared with some, smiled Tajar, indicating a camp full of sleeping people. Some of us are used to waking up early." "You must have been up very early to catch those already," said Alam, pointing to the rabbits. "No, I laid the traps out last night. There's so many rabbits in the area I knew I was bound to catch something." "How is your head?" asked Alam. "Much better today," Tajar replied. "I still have a splitting headache, but the dizziness is gone." The smell of cooking woke up the whole camp. 3 rabbits between them all was only a few mouthfuls each, but it was a welcome addition to the travel loaves that they had. There was plenty of delicious-looking food sitting in the carts, but it belonged to the clan. It would be very rude for the raiding party to eat it before the clan had had a chance to decide how to divide it. Before the raiding party mounted the carts and horses, Alam found an old piece of fabric from among the loot. He made a sling out of it so the box could travel across his back. Before slinging it on, he showed it to Tajar. "Chief has given me the box to look after." "That is a gift indeed," said Tajar. "Too bad you can't open it or do anything remotely useful with it," he teased. "Well, it must open somehow." Maybe." "Look at the carving detail," Alam pointed out. "Have you ever seen anything so exquisite? That young woman from Saphir clan we met last year at the meet was pretty exquisite." Sighed Tajar. "I can still picture her when I close my eyes." The day's journey started out like any journey across the Great Plains. Occasional conversation, occasional singing, and a lot of silence. Something about the vastness of the land and the vastness of the sky encouraged quiet contemplation. Mid-afternoon, Tajar sat upright. "Stop the cart," he insisted. He jumped off and examined the ground that the cart had just covered. "Chief Urlach!" he called out. "What is it?" Urlach called back. "Dargu," Tajar said, pointing at the ground. "It looks like a group of them were here only a few days ago." Alam looked where Tajar was pointing. All he could see was slightly flattened grass. Urlach rode back with Sarek, the clan scoutmaster. "Are you sure?" Urlach asked. "We are outside their hunting range." Tajar bent down and picked up an arrowhead. "Yes, I am sure, Chief." "How many do you think?" "More than 5, less than 20, Sarek answered, scanning the ground. Tajar knew his place enough to be silent and let his teacher take over. "If they were here only a few days ago, they might have seen us traveling to the valley," pondered Urlach. "Curse that fire! They're probably watching us this very moment." He then spoke to Sarek. "Take your horse and see if you can discover where they have come from and where they have gone. Tajar, go with him." "Yes, Chief," replied the weather-beaten, middle-aged scoutmaster. His wrinkled face registered no emotion. It never did. "The rest of us will move on," continued Urlach. "We cannot risk staying still like this. Sarek, Tajar, do not linger. Do not travel far. Do not explore any places where you could be ambushed." "As you wish," replied Tajar. Sarek nodded minutely. Urlach pointed a finger at Sarek. "I expect you to have caught up with us within an hour." Sarek blinked. Giving instructions to Sarek was like telling a river to flow in a certain direction. No matter what you said, the river would follow its own course. "Tajar, are you well enough to ride?" asked Alam. "Of course," he smiled back. Alam was not convinced. The raiding party moved on, leaving Sarek and Tajar behind. Alam looked over his shoulder every few minutes. After a while, he could not tell if the shimmering dots he was looking at were people or shrubs. Even then, he would regularly peer around, hoping they would return soon. "Urlach, Chief!" called out Alam. Urlach reined in his horse and rode back to stand beside Alam. "Yes?" "It must be over an hour." "It is," agreed the chief. "Well, let's go back and find them." "No, we keep moving." "But—" "No, they will return." "How can you be sure?" asked Alam. "Because Sarek always returns. He likes to make sport out of disobeying me. That is why I told him 1 hour, when I really meant before sundown. If he is not back by then, we can all start worrying." The hours before sundown passed slower than usual. There was no singing and little talk. Alam's neck became sore from gazing backwards, but relief filled him just as the first touches of gold were brushing the heavens. "They're coming!" he shouted. First, a cloud of dust grew, then 2 spots shimmering in the evening warmth of the plains could be seen. Finally, Sarek and Tajar rode alongside the caravan. Tajar had excitement written over his entire face. Sarek Looked like he'd spent the afternoon watching grass grow. "Well," demanded Erlock, "what took you so long?" "We followed their trail. It looks like they were shadowing us as they traveled to the raid 3 days ago," reported Sarek. "As we turned our horses to come back, Tajar's keen eyes saw a sign." Tajar tried to look humble, but was clearly pleased with being singled out. The trail split in two at one point. It looked like the smaller of the groups was heading west towards the mountains, Sarek continued. Tajar thought he spotted dust ahead, so we rode towards it, hoping to destroy them. Instead, we found a war party moving at pace towards your dust trail. We instantly turned and rode hard to reach here. "How many?" asked Erlock. 20 to 30, led by a whipper." "When will they reach us?" "It will be tonight," said Sarek. "If they follow their usual strategies, they will try to surround us silently and then rush us." Erlock was silent in contemplation for a moment, and then seemed to come to a decision. He addressed the raiding party. "We ride to the river joining. We will have to risk riding the carts harder than we should. Once there, we can set up camp with the river to defend us on two sides. Sarek? Tajar?" "Yes, Chief," they replied in unison. "You have done well." They bowed their heads in humility. Tajar could not help but smile. Sarek, on the other hand, looked like he was still watching grass grow. The moon was shining through ragged clouds as the raiding party reached the slender, triangular piece of land where the Brightflow River met and consumed the Stonyford River. Both rivers were full and clear. Fresh snowmelt made them fast and cold. No Dargu would come at them through the water tonight. "We do not sleep!" shouted Erlock to the party. "We do not camp! All horses will be tethered near the rivers. Carts will be set in an arc. The ones closest to the river banks will have their wheels as close to the bank as possible. No Dargu should be able to get around them. Put blocks by the wheels so they cannot be pushed. The gaps between the carts we defend. Pile the boxes in the carts under them so the creatures cannot sneak under. Fires are to be made in front of the gaps between the carts. You four," he pointed to Tajar and the 3 surviving archers, "will each stand behind a cart with your bows and an even share the arrows. We 3, he pointed to himself, Alam, and Arj, will take a gap each. We must hold them. Shale and Kumartian, you will stand by the fire and will reinforce us at need. Do you understand?" "Yes, Chief," they all shouted in reply. "What of Sarek, Chief?" asked Alam. "He will lay in wait for them out there," he answered, pointing to the open field, "and will attack them from behind." "By himself?" asked Alam. "Yes." Sarek looked at some dirt under his fingernail. "Do you think he wants to kill Sarek?" Alam whispered to Tajar. "I don't think we need to worry about Sarek," Tajar answered. All was done quickly. They knew that their lives, and by extension, their families' lives, depended on it. For who would defend their loved ones in the next raid if they fell here? Erlock told them to eat, but Alam was too nervous. "Put this on," ordered Erlock. He handed Alam a chain shirt they had won in the raid. It had belonged to one of the caravan guards. Alam was surprised by its weight. "It's the longest and will fit you best," explained Erlock. It fell over his torso heavy and cold. Such a shirt was more valuable than anything he had ever thought of owning. His fingers stroked its hard yet flexible interlocking circles. He knew it would slow him down, but it would also stop most swords and spears. "And this if it fits," said Erlock as he handed a simple helmet, which was tight, but much better than nothing. "Thank you, Chief. I do not deserve such riches. If we live through the night, you will have earned them." Erlock slapped him on the back and wandered over to speak with Arj. "Alam, spar with me?" Shale asked once her father had gone. Why now? We'll tire ourselves." "I need to get rid of nerves, and you need to get used to that shiny shirt," she said. "Good point." They started slowly going through their drills, Alam with his axe, Shale with her short sword. What she lacked in physical power, she more than made up for in speed and agility. Gradually, as their muscles warmed, they sped up, like a dance. "That's enough," interrupted Erlock. "Rest while you can." "Tajar, Why does Erlach scold me for disobedience, yet allows Sarek to get away with whatever he wants? Asked Alam quietly, making sure he was not overheard. It was almost dawn, and still the creatures had not attacked. Alam was relaxing, hoping that the threat was over. Maybe because Sarek is always right when he is disobedient, but you got us all in a fight? And got people killed, muttered Alam. If I had just... Krah! The field in front of them shrieked to life. Dargu leapt up. They had somehow hidden themselves among the long grass. They rushed forward. Only 50 paces away, Alam's stomach sank. How did they get so close? The fires! Shouted Erlach. Alam grabbed branches of leafy brush. He threw them onto the small fire at the opening of his gap. The dry leaves burst into flames. Behind him, Tajar loosed an arrow. The Dargu shrieked in pain on the field beyond. They come to kill your friends! Bellowed Erlach. They will fail! Alam screamed the ritual reply. His heart pumped hard. Alam heard bowstrings twang in front of him. An arrow bounced off the cart to his left. They come to kill your family! Shouted Erlach. Ah! Alam screamed to build up the fury. 30 paces away, the clan archers were firing as fast as they could reload their bows. More screams on the field. Alam saw one of the chest-height creatures take an arrow in the belly. It fell writhing. Will you let them? Shouted Erlach. No! Alam bellowed. The fury absorbed him, fueling the adrenaline, fueling his strength. 20 paces. An arrow came out of nowhere. It struck him on the side of his abdomen. It was nothing. A fly. It barely pierced his chain. He flicked it away and threw a spear at the closest creature. Dead. 10 paces. He bounced on his feet. Come on! He roared. Protect your clan! Shouted Erlach. An arrow struck Alam's helmet and spun away. The creatures had arrived. 3 of them. Gray-brown skin covered in matted fur clothes. Small, black, glinting eyes. Upturned noses. Large ears. Tajar shot one. 2 left. With spears. Alam did not care. Nothing would pierce his shirt. He was invincible. He swung and one went down. Ah! The remaining creature's spear jabbed into his chest. Not deep, but it came out with blood. Alam looked up. There were 2 more now. Somehow seeing his own blood increased his fury. He jabbed the head of his axe towards the one with blood on its spear. The blow knocked it backwards into the fire. It rolled out screaming. Its filthy clothes ignited. It sprinted towards the river. Alam just barely saw the spear tip aimed at his neck. He twisted out of the way. It caught his sling. The cloth ripped. The other Dargu had a long, notched knife. Alam could not dodge both the spear and the knife at the same time. The blade raked across his thigh. No chain there. It went deep, but his fury muted the pain. Tajar's arrow found the knife creature's throat. It dropped, writhing and screaming. Alam's leg quivered as he dodged another spear thrust. The movement was enough to dislodge the box at his back. It fell from the ripped sling. Chakagran! Squealed the creature with a spear in front of Alam. It was pointing to the box on the ground. Alam struck it while it was distracted. It fell dead. They flee! Shouted Erlach from his gap in the carts. No! Said Shaleh. They are running to Alam! Within seconds there were more creatures than Alam could count. All thought of attack was gone. Duck. Dodge. Parry. He swung his axe, but only to keep them away. Alam, I'm here, said Shaleh, appearing at his side. One of the creatures took an arrow in the chest. Arrow's gone! Shouted Tajar. The creatures clustered around the gap, jabbing but not striking. Crack! Behind them a whip snapped. Jurtrab! Was shouted by a creature somewhere on the field. One creature dashed forward, arm outstretched towards the box. Alam was ready. His axe struck first. That was all the others needed. A wave broke on Alam. They recklessly charged. No formation, no clever plan, simple mass rush. Another spear caught him in the abdomen. The chain held most of the blow, not all. He fell back. Alam! Shaleh screamed. Swords flashed, ducking, dancing. 2 creatures landed on top of Alam. One dead, one gurgling. Tajar, Arj, and Erlach had joined the chaos. One of the clan screamed in pain. Impossible to tell who. Alam pushed the creature off him. Ugar Okai! Shouted a voice that sounded like Sarek's. Alam saw a melon-sized thing fly from the field. Over the fire, it landed amidst the battle. It was a head, war-painted and decorated with ear and nose rings. It had to be the Dargu leaders. Seeing the detached had destroyed the creature's courage, they fled. Let them go! Commanded Erlach. The box was missing. No! A creature just past the fire was running with it. Alam ignored the pain in his leg. He set after it as fast as he could. "I said let him go!" Urlach shouted. Alam ran into the darkness of the field. Light from the fires glinted on the box and the spear the creature carried. All else was blackness after being so near to the fire. "Alam!" Urlach again shouted from behind. Alam was gaining. Suddenly, his quarry stopped and turned. But now there were 4 of them. Alam could see the light from the fires reflecting on their teeth as they charged. Behind him, out of the darkness, a spear sped past Alam. It struck the creature carrying the box, knocking it to the ground. The others paused. Sarek stepped next to Alam and shouted something in the language of the creatures. He held up a crude whip and cracked it in their direction. It was enough. They fled. Alam picked up the box. He was suddenly aware of the pain. Limping, he turned to the carts. Urlach strode up to him and punched him in the jaw. Alam collapsed onto his back. "When you disobey me, you betray the clan," he shouted. "When you disobey me, you are being selfish." "I wasn't being selfish." "I went to get the box," he explained. "So what? It is just a little box. We have 4 carts of prizes, and you risk the safety of our party and your clan by chasing a box? But do not argue with me." Spit flew from Urlach's mouth as he shouted. "If you had died, there would only be 5 of us left to protect the cart home, let alone protect the clan." What do you mean 5 of us?" asked Alam. "You will fast for 2 days and no one will speak to you until we return home." "What do you mean 5 of us?" No one replied. Arj had died, as had 2 brothers that were a decade older than Alam. It would be a hard year for their families. Most of the others had received injuries of some kind. Shaleh had a horrible gash on the side of her neck. She was lucky to be alive. Urlach's left shoulder was badly cut. Alam's chain shirt had saved his life 3 times. He was cut in the chest and stomach and had an arrow wound on his side, but none of them were serious. His thigh wound was another matter entirely. It was a deep and ragged mess. Wounds were washed with the cold, clear river water. They then bit into sticks as the larger wounds were stitched and bandaged. As the sun rose, the survivors buried the 3 fallen friends and prayed for the progress of their souls. "Chief, look." Sarek handed an amulet to Urlach. It was on the body of the whipper. It was a simple leather strip necklace with a coin-sized red enamel trinket hanging from it. Urlach looked at it and soundlessly passed it around the group. Etched in black on one side of the trinket was a crude image of an open mouth. On the other side, a fire symbol on top of 5 vertical lines was etched. "What does it mean?" Shaleh asked what Alam was thinking. "It means trouble," said Urlach. "I don't know what the mouth means, but the fire symbol is used by the sorcerers of Morcham." "What were the Dargu doing with it?" wondered Tajar. "Do you think they killed a sorcerer?" Urlach let out a mirthless laugh. "No, I don't think so. If we're lucky, they simply found it somewhere and took it as a treasure." "And if we're unlucky?" asked Tajar. "If we're unlucky, a sorcerer gave it to them for some reason that cannot be good." "It could be enchanted," said Shaleh. "Yes," agreed Urlach. He took it out of Shaleh's hand and placed it on a flat rock. Picking up a hefty rock, he smashed the amulet over and over until it was nothing but red enamel dust and a thin, twisted copper circle. Alam was slightly disappointed that nothing spectacular or mystical happened when it was destroyed. Urlach picked up the remains and threw them into the river. "Mount up! We do not stop, we do not rest, we do not sleep until we reach home." It was a long 2 days before the clan's home camp came into view. Chapter 3. Kalazar. Mourning for the dead lasted 4 days, as was customary for fallen warriors. The Impa clan was small. So many not returning from a raid affected everyone personally. Wailing was heard from every tent. They'd all have to be strong once the 4 days were over, but for now people stayed in their tents weeping and praying. Alam's time was spent in the tent he shared with Kalazar, the clan's healer. She was one of the oldest people in the Impa clan. Her face was lined with deep wrinkles, and lately her shoulders had started to stoop. Despite her advancing years and a body that was stiff, her mind was still sharp as a knife. Alam lay shirtless on his pallet bed so Kalazar would be able to more easily tend to his wounds. "Mother," he said to Kalazar, who was changing the bandage on his thigh, "I don't think I'm a good warrior." "Really?" She turned her smiling, wrinkled face to him. "Why is that?" "First of all, I can hardly stop myself from shaking before battles. Tajar was joking that I looked like I was going to wet myself, and I almost did." "Every warrior feels that way. They simply learn how to hide it," she replied. "That is what Urlach said, but I'm not sure," he disagreed. "Urlach and Sarek are so calm they look like they've just woken up from a nap." "It's called acting, dear." "Secondly," said Alam, plowing on, "I'm having nightmares. I keep seeing the face of the man I killed in our raid. Even when I'm awake, I see it happening over and over again. I can't help wondering if someone is mourning him, just as we are mourning those he killed from our clan." She stayed quiet, so Alam continued. "Thirdly, I disobeyed Chief Urlach's instructions twice in 2 days. The first time, my actions cost the lives of some of our clan. I don't know if I'll ever be able to look in the face of the family members of the warriors who died in that first raid. If I'd just done what the chief had said, maybe they would still be alive. The second time, I was carried away with the emotion of the battle and ran after that stupid box, though he told me not to." Silence stretched out in front of them. Alam could tell by her expression that she was thinking carefully of a response. Finally, she spoke. "Alam, I'm glad you're having nightmares and visions during the day, because it means you're still a whole man. When we take a life, we also lose something of our own life force. If you did not have regrets about killing, there would be something wrong indeed. That is what Urlach told me." "If he says the same as me, he must be wise," she joked. Alam pressed on. "But I've been trained since a child to be a warrior, and that means killing." "No," she countered. "Being an Impa clan warrior means protecting those around you." "And raiding," he said. "We place too much importance on raiding," she said dismissively with a wave of her hand. "And anyway, if a raid is done properly, no one should die. Having said that, there are times when we have no choice but to take a life." "Yes?" prompted Alam. "When wolves come, they take our flock. If we let them, they will return again and again until all the animals are dead. We kill the wolf to save the flock. Some people, like that sorcerer you slew, are wolves. When the wolf attacks the flock, you kill it, for a wolf will always be a killer." Alam nodded his head thoughtfully. "But this disobedience," she continued, "is another matter. It worries me. A clan leader cannot let it pass, even one as sensible as Urlach. Tell me, why did you ignore Urlach's orders in the valley and rush to attack the sorcerer?" "Because it didn't seem right to leave a holy man to be killed," said Alam. "And also, when he begged us to help, I had a sudden sense he was a good man and that protecting him was the honorable thing to do. It doesn't make much sense now, though." "And why," she asked, "did you chase after the Dargu when Urlach had clearly told you not to?" "Because it had the box," he replied. "So?" "Well, I guess the fury dominated my reason." "Were there any other reasons to chase it?" "Yes," he conceded. "I've had 2 visions when touching it, but no one else has. I think there's something important about it, and I don't know if there's more to it." She walked over to where the box rested on a low table in the center of the tent. "Something in my heart tells me you are right," she said, picking it up and examining it. "Alam, when you were found as a baby, Chief Urlach was merciful to you by allowing you to live in the clan and under my tent. It was his right to leave you to die. After all, your darker skin and sharper nose clearly show that you were born different to the rest of the clan. You were probably born somewhere far away from the endless plains. Do you know why you were spared? No. Why? Because Urlach is a kind man, and because I begged him to. This was news to Alam. Really? Why did you do that? You were so frail and helpless, someone needed to protect you. Also, for some reason, when he was holding you in the air, I suddenly felt that there was something special about you, said Kelazar. Well, that's how I feel about the box, said Alam. Yes, but you are much more useful than a box that doesn't even open. At least you bring me firewood from time to time, she smiled. Now, if you don't mind, I would like to discuss something even more important. Yes? Asked Alam curiously. Marriage. Marriage! Alam sat bolt upright. Yes. You've proven yourself in battle, and with so many men not returning from the raid, there is a greater responsibility for all healthy men to be married and producing children. But I'm not old enough to be a father. Of course you are. If my memory is correct, which it is, you are 20 summers old. You were a very young infant when you were found, and this is the 20th summer you have lived in this tent. Kelazar waved him to silence, seeing that he was about to raise an objection. And we also have the sad problem that many of the women and children do not have men to protect their tent or show their boys how to grow to be men. There will have to be some mercy unions. Surely Chief Urlach wouldn't force me to take a wife. I'm too young. Even as he said it, Alam knew Kelazar was right. Chief Urlach was well in his rights to assign marriages in the best interest of the clan, and he was easily old enough to marry. One of Tajar's cousins was married with 2 children by the time he was 19 summers. He may have to assign you a wife. Unless you have someone in mind already? Kelazar's eyes twinkled mischievously. No. Well, in truth, I have been thinking a lot about Chalet lately. Kelazar's smile dropped. What, is that a bad choice? Asked Alam. Not a bad choice, but it is an ill-fated one. Why? Because she is the chief's only surviving child, because she is a daughter, and because she is beautiful. She said it as if the implications were obvious. So? Asked Alam. So, there is no chance she will marry for love. Mark my words, she will be intended to marry into another clan, so that the peace of Impa clan is safeguarded. I suspect Chief Urlach will take her to the clan meet this year. If I were chief, that is what I would do. Alam felt suddenly sick. Married into another clan? I would never see her again. Clan meet is only in 1 moon. A tapping sounded on the tent flap. Kelazar, may we come in? We bring fresh bandages and water for you. It was the voice of Pim, Urlach's wife. Although clan custom was that people stayed in their tents as long as possible during the days of mourning, it was the responsibility of the chief's family to ensure everyone was well. Of course, clan mother, said Kelazar as she swung the door flap open. You know you are always welcome in our tent. Pim was a graceful woman whom the years had only lightly touched. She was smallish in stature, with a round face and the beginning of gray hair and small wrinkles around her eyes. Alam liked her for her kindness and gentleness. Although she was the most powerful woman in the clan, she never forced her will upon others. Rather, people deferred to her out of well-earned respect. Alam politely rose from his bed as she entered the tent. Behind her, Chalet stepped through the door flap as well. Alam felt his face flush and his heart jump. He looked down at his feet, partly out of respectful deference, but also so Chalet would not see his red face. Greetings, clan mother. Greetings, Chalet, he said. It is an honor to welcome you to our tent. It is an honor for us to visit such a courageous young warrior, Pim said. Chief Urlach has told me of your heroic deeds. Alam looked up in confusion. At first, he thought that Pim was mocking him for his cowardice, but there was no trace of anything but joyful praise on her face. Behind her, Chalet was smiling at him. Her ink-black hair was plaited simply behind her back, which showed off her beautiful oval face. A bandage was wound around her neck to help heal the wound she took from the Dargu. He turned his eyes back to Pim. I did no heroic deeds, he said truthfully. Was it 3 or 4 Dargu you slew? I don't know. The battle fury overcame me. It was 4, Chalet said, smiling. Daughter, who did you say slew the sorcerer? Pim asked. It was Alam, mother. Kelazar? Yes, clan mother. When did you last hear of any clansman slaying one of those blood-crazy, torture-loving, power-crazed sorcerers from Morcham? I have never heard of it in my entire life, Clan Mother. Clan Mother, said Alam, please stop. Your own daughter is braver than I am. Yes, she nodded. She probably is. Alam did not know whether to be amused or offended that she was agreeing with him. The three women burst out laughing, which added to his confusion and brought the redness back to his face. I am sorry, Alam, Pim said. I mean no disrespect. Alam bowed. Kalazar, said Shale, we've brought you some fresh cloth for bandages and a leg of mutton. Thank you, Shale. Thank you, Pim. You always know how to lift our spirits. Please sit so we can make you some tea. We would like that, Pim said. Alam, please stoke the fire, Kalazar said. And, she added in a whisper, it is time to put your shirt back on. We do not want our young guest to have to avert her gaze from you all afternoon. Alam was walking in a valley familiar, yet unfamiliar. The quiet solitude held menace, not peace. A bald man with maroon robes stepped out from a cave. Darkness gathered around his hands. Alam charged. A cloud of darkness shot towards him. Time slowed. Alam watched it pass harmlessly over his head. It was as wisps of darkness, like death made solid and vaporous at the same time. With a slow, deliberate movement, he struck the man with his axe. Thunk! The axe came out red and wet. Why kill me? The man asked with sad eyes. I do not know, Alam replied. He struck again. Thunk! If I die, who will care for my family? He pleaded. It was too late. Alam pulled the axe out of the man's side. He fell, so much red, spraying everywhere, covering his clothes, covering his hands, enough red to cover the valley. Alam, wake up, whispered Kalazar. It is only a dream. She gently rocked his shoulders. The tent was black and cool, but he was covered in sweat. I wish it were only a dream, he muttered. Chapter 4. Fire Meeting. Alam opened the tent door. The days of mourning were over. It was fine for families to quietly grieve, but the rest of the clan must hide their tears and move on. Bring back some fresh water, Alam, Kalazar called out. Of course, he replied. Bending over to pick up the bucket hurt, but then so did walking and breathing. His wounds were healing quickly thanks to Kalazar's skills, but the cut on his thigh was still heavily bandaged. She told him it would scar. Tajar says women like scars. Not that he would know. Alam headed for the river. Shortly after passing out of the camp, he heard feet hurrying after him. He tried to twist his torso to see who it was, but changed his mind when the wounds on his torso reminded him that they had come along for the walk. More cautiously, he turned his whole body around. It was Shale. Hello, Alam, she said. It seemed for a moment that a smile flickered on her face before she composed herself into a more seemly, solemn expression. Mourning may be over, but it was still not the time for showing joy outside one's tent. Good morning, Shale. How's your neck? Healing well, thanks to Kalazar's ointment. And you? How are your wounds? Healing well, also thanks to Mother, he said. I hardly feel them now. You are a really bad liar. She only barely stopped herself from smiling. The way you walk tells a different story. Are you fetching water as well? Asked Alam, pointing to the bucket in her hand and changing the subject. Yes. Shall I join you? He started hobbling towards the river. Only if you can keep up with me. Shale's face broke into a smile. So did Alam's. How is your family? Alam asked. Mother is grieving for Arj, of course. Arj had been Pim's younger cousin. And father is worried. He hides it well, but I can tell that his mind is troubled. I think he worries about the clan being weakened with so many warriors lost. Yes, said Alam. Mother mentioned that your father may order some mercy unions. Do you think it's likely? Shelley's face fell. He has been talking about marriages. Well, what did he say? I don't think I should say. He will already be mad at me for saying this much. Shelley and Alam both withdrew into their own thoughts. They filled their buckets and began the short walk back to the camp. Shelley? Yes? What do you think about scars? Alam asked. Shale was bewildered by the change of topics. This may surprise you, but I don't think about scars. Most normal people don't. Do you? I hear that women find them attractive on men. Ah, she said, understanding dawning on her. You're hoping to suddenly become more handsome. No. Well, I don't think scars on your legs are going to improve you much. The ones on your chest, if they scar up, might help. But what you really need is a small one on your face. On my face? He smiled. Yes, not too big and not on your nose, or lips, or eyes. She stopped and examined his face. There, she pointed at his cheek. Or maybe your jawline. Then I think women will fall at your feet. That sounds good, he says. Too bad I don't have one there. I own a knife. I could help you, she offered. Ha! I bet you could. Shale! Alarm! Chief Urlach's angry voice broke their playful banter. They had not seen him approaching. Wipe those ridiculous grins off your faces! Shame on you! Have you no respect? They dropped their heads and murmured their apologies. Urlach led Shale away as if she were a child and spoke stiffly to Alam over his shoulder. Tonight we have a fire meeting to divide the raiding prizes. Bring the box. Alam handed the water to Kalazar, picked up the wood axe, and went limping off toward the hills. Chopping branches would be a good way to get rid of tension. On the way to the small patch of trees, Sarek appeared and beckoned Alam to follow him. Alam picked up his pace to catch up with the scoutmaster. What is it, Sarek? Training. Training today? Yes. Can't he see I'm injured? They rounded the edge of the trees and Tajar came into view. He was practicing archery. Alam, what are you doing here? Tajar called out. I have no idea. Tajar, put down your bow and pick up your swords. Today we work on something that both of you need to learn, said Sarek. What is that? Asked Tajar. Not getting killed. The two friends looked quizzically at each other. It's going to be a long day with little rest, Sarek continued. What about Alam's injuries? Tajar asked. Sarek looked blankly at Tajar, as if it were a waste of time to reply to such a stupid question. Instead, he drew his sword and lashed out at Alam. Alam threw up his wood axe to protect his face. He only just raised it in time. What was that for? He shouted. Your enemies will not wait for you to heal. Another lightning-fast swing was only barely stopped by Alam's axe haft. It would probably only take one more blow before it snapped in two. Alam, in both battles you relied on strength and fury. This is as Urlach has instructed you, and it works well. What you now need to learn is how to use the reach that your height gives you, and how to avoid blows. He turned to Tajar, including him in the conversation. You're both young. That means you're quick, which is good. But it also means you are stupid, which is bad. Young men think they are unbeatable. This is not true. Think of your friends that fell in the valley and against the Dargu. Bakar, Alam muttered. In his mind's eye, he saw his young friend falling from the cliff wall for the 100th time. First, you will defend against spears, Sarek said as he picked up a long stick. Over and over, Alam and Tajar had to defend against Sarek's attacks. He gave them no instructions on how to block or avoid. He was much quicker than his age hinted at. Within a few seconds, he would land a blow and calmly say, You're dead. You're dead twice. You're dead thrice. You're dead 4 times. After both Tajar and Alam were dead 20 times, Sarek paused and asked, Do you understand yet? He hasn't taught us anything other than being jabbed with a stick hurts. Yes, we understand, Scoutmaster Sarek, Tajar replied with a bow. Do we? Sarek waited for Tajar to continue. You've shown us that we are young and stupid, that even an old man can kill us in battle, that our defenses are useless and predictable. I'm not predictable. Alam, what have you learned? Sarek asked. Alam was angry and sore. This approach to training was so different to what he was used to with Urlach that he felt frustrated and lost. It wasn't a fair lesson, Scoutmaster, Alam said. Tajar shot a worried glance at Alam. We weren't able to attack back, explained Alam. Indeed, it was not fair, but not in the way you think. This time you may attack me as well. But you are injured. Would you think it fairer if I only used my left hand? You need not do that, Scoutmaster. Tajar laughed and stepped away. "Before we start, please humor an old man," said Sarek. "Tajar, pass me that scarf." Once it was in his hand, Sarek tied it around his head so one of his eyes was covered. "Please, no, Scoutmaster," said Alam. "I do not wish for you to be hurt." "Nor do I," replied the older man. Tajar laughed again and moved even further away. "Attack when you're ready," instructed Sarek. He shifted the stick to his left hand and placed his right behind his back. Time to teach the master. Alam struck out quickly but lightly. He wanted to get back at the Scoutmaster, but not hurt him. Sarek stepped out of the way. He moved in close and jabbed Alam hard in the gut. "You're dead 21 times. Attack when you're ready." Alam stepped back. Maybe I shouldn't go so easy on him. He lashed out for Sarek's head. The older man blocked the blow. He pushed the shaft away, stepped in close, and in one fluid motion smacked Alam on the head before jabbing him in the gut. "You're dead 22 times. Over and over the scene was repeated. Alam would attack in a different way. Sarek would turn his defense into an attack, and Alam would lose. "You're dead 33 times. Attack when you're ready." "No, Scoutmaster," Alam panted. "I understand the lesson." "Yes." "I am young and stupid. Even a one-eyed old man using his offhand can beat me. My techniques are useless and predictable." "You may rest for a few moments before we move on to the next lesson. But while you rest, ponder this. Humility brings knowledge." Sarek worked them hard for the rest of the day. He started by focusing on their posture and footwork. Next, he taught them drills to improve speed, so their muscles could do a sequence of movements without their minds having to think. They learned both attacking and defending techniques with spears, swords, and axes. The sun was setting when Sarek finally said, "Good. Tomorrow we start again." "Thank you, Scoutmaster," said Alam. "I've learned a lot today." "And your injuries?" "They still hurt," smiled Alam. That night, the whole of Impa clan, apart from a handful of sentries, gathered in the center of the camp. A bonfire was lit. In a land of grass, where wood was scarce, such an extravagant use of firework was reserved for special occasions. 5 goats on spits and more than a dozen fish on sticks were roasting for the feast. Flat hot stones were pulled out of the fire for flatbread to cook on. "Tonight we leave mourning behind," Chief Urlach addressed his people. "We have faced dark times these past few days. Many honorable, courageous members of our clan have left us to journey to the world beyond. We wish them well and remember them in our prayers. It is a journey we will all take someday. But not tonight. Tonight we celebrate the winning of a great prize. Tonight we reveal the bounty from our raid. Tonight we decide what to keep and what we trade. Tonight we sing and dance and feast." The clan as one voice cheered and moved towards the spits and hot stones. Alam moved to Chalet. "A word?" he asked her. Her smile changed to curiosity when she saw the serious look on his face. "What is it?" He led her away, visible to the fire, but out of earshot. "I asked you today what Chief Urlach has told you about marriage, but you refused to tell me. Please, does he have plans for you?" "Oh, Alam." She glanced furtively over to those gathered by the fire. "Last year at the clan meet, he was presented with an offer of marriage from me and the eldest son of a Stavka clan." "Rustam? He agreed that you would marry Rustam? That man's a brute." "Shh! No, Father refused the offer." Relief flooded through Alam. "Good. It was good, until we lost so many warriors. Now he says he will have to marry me to form an alliance to help protect the clan." It felt as though a knife had plunged into Alam's stomach. "When?" he whispered. "This year. We go to clan meet in 1 moon's time." "Only 1 moon." "What if you refuse?" he asked. "You know I can't." "Indeed. Duty first, joy second." "Well, what about my life?" "It is not as important." "What about her life?" "Perhaps her husband will be good to her." "Perhaps he won't." "Perhaps he will." "Alam, stop brooding. Come, let's join the feast." When he lifted his head, he saw that her eyes were wet. A sudden impulse struck him. He moved closer to her and bent his head towards her lips. "No, She stopped him with her hand and gently pushed him away. "You are to be married as well." "What?" "To Inzu. She'll make you a good wife." "But I don't want to marry Inzu. She's still young," said Shale, "and she's already proven that she can bear children." "She's not the one I want," he said. "Stop it, Alam. Don't say anything more. If you value our friendship, you'll not give even the slightest hint that I've told you this." She wiped her eyes, turned away from him, and went to rejoin the celebration. 1 moon. What do I do once she's gone? For the next hours, Alam felt alone, surrounded by a sea of joy. Around him there was no talk of sadness. Food was eaten, drink was drunk, songs were sung. Even through his gloom, Alam could tell that a feeling of peace and joy permeated the camp. Once the eating was finished, Urlach brought out the prizes. The clan gathered around excitedly. They started by giving out the weapons and armor claimed from the Valley Raid and the Dargu attack. The recipients accepted them loudly and eagerly, swinging swords in the air and flashing the mail and shields around. Urlach then revealed the veteran's sword and armor. They were things of beauty which caused an intake of breath from more than one warrior. Urlach passed them around so they could be appreciated more fully. The crowd looked from face to face, wondering who would be the fortunate person to receive them. "These we trade," said Urlach. Disappointment was clear on many faces. "They will fetch a good price. We will exchange them for furs or perhaps breeding mares. Also, I do not want to give the impression that any of our warriors are more important than others. If I were to give these to anyone, including myself, it could set up envy among friends and eat away at the unity of our clan." Many of the warriors knew they would never hold a blade and armor of their like again. Nonetheless, everyone bowed their head twice to show that they agreed with the wisdom of their chief. Next, he brought out the clothing, food items, and boxes of general supplies. These were shared out evenly among the families. After that were the horses. They had been corralled separately from the rest of the clan's horses, and had been a big topic of speculation. A good horse was central to a family's prosperity and status. One at a time, he called someone up to claim a beast. As he did so, he explained why each one was given. The last horse was the finest, the tall, magnificent, proud gray that had belonged to the veteran. "The final horse goes to Alam." The shock was enough to pull him out of his misery. "What? Why me?" Tajar nudged him in the ribs. "Get moving." "And you might want to close your mouth," he whispered. Alam walked up, bowed low, and took the reins of the horse from his chief. "Thank you, Chief Urlach. I do not deserve such a beast." "You're the only one in the clan tall enough to ride her without looking ridiculous," Urlach replied with a smile. Alam bowed low a second time, while everyone hooted in celebration for him. Alam led the beautiful beast back out of the circle, beyond the tents and to the corral. He stroked her neck, checked her teeth, felt her legs, and examined her hooves. "You are perfect," he told the horse while patting her neck. "I wonder if you are a sign." Alam left these thoughts behind and returned to the fire. Urlach had brought out the chest of coins claimed in the raid and the sorcerer's large book. "I now ask for the wisdom of the clan to decide what to do with these next items. There are more than 400 silver coins, 200 copper coins, and 18 coins of gold in this box." To illustrate, he poured the coins onto the ground. Silence. No one had ever seen such treasure. It was wealth beyond their reckoning. "We also claimed this book from the sorcerer. The writing in it is strange. No one that I have asked can read it. If it is just a book, it is worth something, though I do not know what. But if these words have something to do with magic, it could be extremely valuable. So my question is, what do we do with them?" In the end, it was decided to divide the silver and copper evenly among every man, woman, and child, but to entrust Chief Urlach with the gold for trading. It was also decided to trade the book at clan meet, or failing that in Last Home, whenever the long journey there was next taken. "The night is getting old and our fire is almost gone, but we have one more item to discuss. Alam, bring forward the box." Alam took it out of the sling that he now habitually carried over his shoulder and walked forward. He handed it to Urlach. The chief passed it around. While people looked at it, he told how the sorcerer and blood knights had been sent to claim it, how the holy man gave it to Alam and asked him to keep it safe, how it was unable to be opened, how he suspected that the attack of the Dargu was connected to the box, and how he felt that it was dangerous but might be valuable. "Clan Impa," he said, "I have given it to Alam for safekeeping, but now I ask you, what shall we do with it?" "Burn it! It sounds cursed, and we already have plenty of silver and gold," replied one of the elders. "Give it to the Dargu as a peace offering," suggested someone else. "Break it open so we can see what is inside," added another elder. Discussion opened up. Many supported selling it, some urged destroying it, none suggested keeping it. Alam stayed quiet during the debate. As he listened, a desire to speak grew inside him. He struggled to resist it because the ideas in his head were contrary to the way the clan worked. As the debate continued, the compulsion to speak grew stronger and stronger. Finally, he stood up. "Clan Impa, I have a different view. Please forgive me, for it is a view that sounds like it goes against our ways. I know that many will disagree with me when I say that I do not think that the fate of this small box is to be decided by our clan. It is mine to decide. Mine alone." Silence spread over the people. Frowns creased the brows of many, especially the elders. Even Kelazar knitted her brows in concern. To put one's own thought above the entire clan, unless one was chief, was extreme arrogance. Alam continued. "The holy man singled me out. He told me to take it to Clarisai. Ever since he beckoned to me, I felt drawn to protect it. I do not want to either sell or bargain it away. It also gives me strange visions that I wish to unravel. It is calling to my heart and mind." "But none of us know where or who Clarisai is," pointed out Urlach. "That is true," Alam agreed. "I begin to think that the foreigner has bewitched you," said Urlach. "Then I am doomed, for I feel I must fulfill my pledge, however unwise it was to make," said Alam. After a stretch of silence, Shaleh spoke up. There was worry in her voice. "Well, what will you do, Alam?" "In 1 month's time, I'll take it to someone who understands magic. Hopefully I can find someone that can better guide me to return it to its owner." "Such as the hermit that attends the clan meet?" asked Shaleh. "He is a healer and a soothsayer," said Alam. "Do you think he practices this kind of magic, the kind that seals boxes and attracts monsters?" There was no reply. "No," Alam continued. "I'll visit Last Home and hope to find someone there." "And then?" asked Urlach, standing up. Thunder was on his brow. "If you find someone who knows about it, will you hand it to them? Will you return to the clan?" As Alam spoke, many of the vague thoughts that had played through his mind over the past number of days converged. Shame that his actions killed the clan warriors. Fear that the box could draw even more danger to it. Despair that Shaleh would be betrothed to another. Through a confusion of emotions, a path was appearing. He glanced over at Shaleh. "Only 1 moon. I will not return to the clan until my oath is fulfilled. If I find a place or person named Clarisai when I reach Last Home, I will return. Otherwise, I will continue my search." Urlach began to pace. "You have no idea how long that will take." "True," agreed Alam. "Can you not hear your selfishness? You are needed here," Urlach stated. Alam remained silent with his head bowed. He was honest enough with himself to acknowledge that part of his decision was indeed selfish. "Who raised you, boy?" demanded Urlach. This was a ritual question. "I am raised by the clan," he gave the answer that all Impa children memorize from the moment they are long enough to have their first haircut. "Who feeds you, boy?" "I am fed by the clan." "Who watches over you, boy?" "I am watched over by the clan." "And who do you follow, boy?" "I follow my chief," replied Alam, finishing the ritual questions. "And what is the first responsibility of an Impa warrior?" Urlach asked. "To protect those that have raised me, fed me, and watched over me." "How many warriors do we have now?" demanded Urlach. "Less than 20. Have you ever seen us so vulnerable?" "No," replied Alam meekly. "Yet you're happy to abandon those who raised you at a time of weakness? To have the Dargu or one of our larger neighbors attack us while you gallivant around the plains on some self-appointed quest?" "It is not self-appointed," Alam retorted. Some of Urlach's shouting was starting to resonate inside him, and he found his own anger and pain surging to the surface. "I did not give you this quest, and I am your chief. But you did tell me to look after it. You were the one that told me not to let it out of my sight." "And what would you do if I told you to do something different now?" asked Urlach. "Well, that depends," Alam answered hotly. He knew the moment he said it, it was the wrong thing to say. It was the truth, but it was not the truth he was raised with. After a moment's silence, Urlach's voice came out menacing and low. "And if your chief tells you to hand over the box to the Dargu?" "I would refuse." Urlach took a step forward. Alam raised his head briefly, enough to register the horror on the faces around him. "I mean no disrespect," he muttered as his gaze fell to the ground. "Whether you mean it or not, you are disrespecting your chief, you insolent boy," roared Urlach. He thrust his arm out. "Hand it to me." "No." Alam's voice was small and weak. "Hand it to me," Urlach repeated and took another step closer. "No." Alam's voice came out stronger. Stubborn bitterness was swelling in his gut. "First you stripped my happiness by deciding to marry Chalet to another tribe, and now you try to take away something my conscience tells me I must do." Urlach's head spun to his daughter. "You told him?" Chalet kept her gaze directed to the ground. Her silence was a clear answer. "Alam, if you want to stay in my clan, then hand it to me now." A part of Alam knew he should stop and beg forgiveness, but the warrior's rage was too strong in him by now. "No, I will not." Urlach's mouth opened to speak, but at that moment the bonfire suddenly flared up. Everyone cried in shock and threw themselves away from the unnatural blaze. In the midst of the flames, an emptiness appeared, a swirling blackness. Into that blackness, the image of an enlarged torso took shape, a man, or perhaps a demon. All of him looked of cruelty. He wore scarred leather armor adorned with metal studs that gleamed in the unearthly fire. Although his frame was covered by the leather, it was unmistakably powerful and lean. A huge greatsword dripping with liquid was held in a gloved hand. His broad face was adorned by a short-cut beard and framed by dark, long waving hair. The top of his hair was pulled together in a ponytail that kept it out of his eyes and showed off a vivid scar that crossed his forehead from temple to hairline. His eyes gleamed with absolute confidence. "I am Gretch. I am called the Hunter, Silent Death, the Sleepless One. Never have I failed to catch my prey, never. Weep and wail, for you are next. You have something that belongs to my liege, a carved box of black wood. Yield it, and the pain will be short. Know of a truth, there are many things in this world worse than death, and I am one of them. I am Gretch, the Hunter, and you are my prey." In an instant, the image was gone, and the bonfire returned to its normal state. The clan did not have time to ponder the strange message, for at that moment a shrill cry rent the air. Dargu rushed like a wedge into the camp. There were too many to count. "To arms!" yelled Chief Urlach above the screams of panic. "No armor! No axe!" Alam grabbed a knife and a thick burning stick from the bonfire. He sprinted to where the wedge of Dargu had entered the clearing. Fury boiled within him. In front of him he saw Inzu, the woman Chalet said he was to marry, hit the ground. Her toddler screaming at her side. An uncommonly large Dargu raised its spear to plunge into the child. Instinct took over. Alam threw his knife. His feet would be too late. The knife struck, but not deep enough. The creature squealed, but fell. It was all the time Alam needed. His burning stick finished it off. He pulled the toddler into his arm and planted his feet either side of Inzu. A creature charged him, screaming. It swung a rusty blade. The day's training paid off. He shifted his weight and used the reach of the stick. Alam's blow hit the creature on the top of its shoulder. It sprawled on the ground. Alam brought the stick down on it with all his might. The long stick broke in two. He had overextended. From somewhere, a spear point took him in the lower back. Adrenaline muted the pain and increased his rage. He dropped the stick and grabbed the spear shaft. He wrenched it out of the creature's hands. Alam roared. It fled. He became aware of his surroundings. Others were fighting. Tajar was by his side. Urlach, Sarek, Shale, the whole clan was fighting. "Please, Alam!" Inzu was standing near him. "When did she stand up?" Her hands were outstretched. Blood was running from a gash above her eye. "Please, Alam, hand her to me." He'd almost forgotten the child in his arm. She was released and ran crying to Inzu. Alam's eyes sought Shale. She was fighting cat and mouse with two of the creatures, dodging and swinging. They were trying to flank her. "Shale!" he roared as he ran. He crashed into the closest one like a bull. It sprawled to the ground. Shale took advantage of the second creature's momentary distraction. She slipped into its reach and slashed with her long knife. Alam's stolen spear finished off the one on the ground. Alam, Tajar, and Shale, along with the others, worked together on the fringes of the battle. While they tried to stop the further spread of the creatures into the camp, Urlach and Sarek recklessly crashed into the midst of them in search of their leader, a fat one wearing a wolf skull as a helmet. Sarek protected Urlach from attack while the chief battled the Dargu leader. He was no match for Urlach. In a couple of vicious swipes, the Dargu's head was rolling on the ground. As one, the surviving creatures turned and ran. Sarek headed up a small party of warriors that pursued them. They slayed a dozen creatures before returning. The battle lasted less than 10 minutes, but was disastrous nonetheless. Another 5 of Impa clan were dead, including a mother of 4 children and an elder. "I've never heard of the Dargu attacking our clan before," said Tajar in shock to Alam and Shale. "Neither have I," agreed Alam. "It must be the box," suggested Shale. Chief Urlach and Sarek approached Alam, Tajar, and Shale. Urlach tossed something small to Alam. "Does this look familiar?" he asked rhetorically. Alam caught it one-handed. It was a small red enamel amulet with an open mouth etched on one side and an image of a flame over 5 vertical lines on the other. "It's the same as the one found after our last battle," said Alam. "So the Dargu are working for the sorcerers over the mountains?" asked Tajar. "It looks that way," replied Urlach. "Father, what of the message in the fire?" asked Shale. "Hopefully it was simply to distract us so the creatures could surprise us." "And if not?" she probed. He did not answer. Instead, he raised his voice. "Clan Impa, there is no rest for tonight. All men and women able to fight will stand watch. All others will break camp. Tomorrow we bury the dead and then set out to find a new camp. We will mourn when we are safe." Around the fire, weeping started for the fallen. Urlach turned to Alam. "Alam, you see the dangerous state we are in. Do you still intend to leave on your quest?" "Yes," Alam replied with a head bowed in shame. "Don't you see that if this box stays, the attacks will keep coming?" "Not if we move away and either destroy it or sell it," Urlach countered. "Well, what do you say?" "In 1 moon's time, after clan meet, I'll take it as I said earlier," said Alam. "I'll only be gone 1 or 2 moons." Urlach slumped for a moment. He took a deep breath, raised himself to full height, and spoke in a voice that carried over the fire clearing. All turned to hear him. "Alam, when you were found, you had no lineage, no status, no honor. It was my right to make you a slave. Instead, as a young chief, I took you in, gave you to Kalazar to be raised, trained you to be a warrior with my own hands, and this very evening gave you your own horse. I have done all this even though you are a foreigner and not of our blood, with no birthrights. In exchange, you have decided to leave us, against my will, in a time of great need. Therefore I, Chief Urlach of Impa clan, banish you forever from our lands. Tomorrow, when we break camp, you will leave us. If you are ever seen in our lands after that, you will be hunted and slain without mercy as an outsider and enemy. You may take with you 5 days' food, any of your possessions, including your weapons, and your horse. This judgment brings me much pain, for I have raised you as I would a son. But from tomorrow on, this judgment brings me much pain, for I have raised you as I would a son. But from tomorrow you will be a stranger to me and all my people." He turned his back to Alam and walked out of the fire clearing. Chapter 5. Agreement. Gretch was utterly still. Kneeling on one knee for so long was past pain. It was pure willpower. He clenched his jaw as sweat ran down his face and dripped off his nose. Despite the agony, he knew better than to move before the ritual was finished, however long that might be. It had started with Liege Merrick's deep robe swishing softly as he moved around the slaves and, one by one, assessed whether they would be suitable for the night's ritual. The pleading started once the knife came out. Pleading never made any difference.
"One day, likely as not, I will be on that table."
The screaming started as Liege Merrick's knife slashed back and forth. Faceless, masked soldiers held the slaves down until one by one they stopped writhing. All the while, the liege conducted the ritual that drained their life force as well as their blood. He took a long time doing it, making sure to gather as much life force as possible out of each victim. After so much screaming, it seemed unnaturally quiet when the final slave died. The sound of Liege Merrick's swishing robes and the steady dripping from the table were the only things to be heard. Liege Merrick dismissed the masked soldiers and then approached Gretch with a bronze bowl full of crimson liquid. Dipping his hands in it, he painted symbols on Gretch's face, arms, and chest. His lips moved rapidly as he chanted words of power. Gretch felt power flowing into him where the bloody symbols were drawn. It started on his skin, an itching that soaked into his muscles, moving towards his heart. Pain was gone. Weariness left him. A force of life penetrated him so strongly his limbs began to shake. A desire to run, to hunt, to kill invaded his mind.
"I must keep a clear head."
"Rise, Hunter Gretch," ordered Liege Merrick. Gretch instantly obeyed, but kept his gaze down.
"My liege,"
he pledged. "Go now, sleepless one. While the sacrifice's life force is in you, nothing will be able to withstand you. Your body will not tire. Your senses will be sharp. You will be stronger, faster than anything you could meet on the plains. Thanks to me, you will be unstoppable. Bring me the box. Slay those that have it, but do not tarry. The life force that I have bound to you will eventually be called to the realm of the spirit. Once it leaves you, it will take with it the strength I have given you. So go now and return with all speed." Gretch did not move. He remained still with bowed head. A frown creased the shiny bald head of Liege Merrick. "Gretch, why do you remain when I have given you an order and a mighty gift?"
"I need to be clear, my liege,"
he replied. "Clear of what?"
"Our agreement."
"What of it?" asked Merrick. He slowly circled Gretch like a wolf around its prey.
"That it will be honored,"
Gretch answered. "Fulfill your goal and it will be honored. Fail, and you know what will happen." Without another word, Gretch turned and gave himself over to the life force. It flooded into him. The hunt, the kill were all that mattered. He ran from the room, from the ancient stone building. He ran towards the mountains that separated the land of Morcham from the plains. He needed no horse. Horses needed to rest, to sleep, to eat. Gretch the hunter did not need such things. Chapter 6. Banishment. Calazar quietly wept as she cleaned and bandaged the wound Alam had taken in the lower back. It wasn't deep, but it was dirty. The top of his pelvis had stopped the point from killing him. Alam was completely miserable, but not from the wound. His whole life would be gone within a day. Not one moon. Now there's only one night. "How does that feel?" Calazar asked. "Fine, mother," he replied. "Not too tight? The bandage is fine." Calazar's fingers finished the final knot. She then asked what had most been worrying her. "Will you find another tribe to join? Or do you think you will find a home in the town? The town will allow anyone to live there." "I don't know, mother," he mumbled. "I'm sure Urlach will change his mind. You could try returning at the beginning of autumn. Extra hands will be needed. He will take you back. He loves you too much to stay angry with you." Alam did not reply. Instead, he stood up and turned around. He wrapped his arms around her as tears rose up, clouding his vision. "Thank you, Mother, for everything you have done for me every day since you took me in. Yours has been the most important love in my life." "Stop talking like we'll not see each other again." He kissed her brow and pulled away from her. "I must say farewell to my friends," he said. She nodded silently and watched him leave. Tajar was waiting outside the tent. The night had reached that quiet hour, when time seemed slower. The two friends fell in stride with each other and began meandering through the camp. "So, what will you do tomorrow?" asked Tajar. A frown creased his brow. "I guess I head north to Last Home." "Make sure you follow the river for the first day," said Tajar. "Fresh water could be a big problem later on in your journey. You'll also be able to catch fish." "Good idea." "Do you need help packing?" "No," answered Alam. "I'll only take a couple of saddlebags as well as the usual gear. It won't take long to be ready." "All right," said Tajar. "Well, I'll see you in the morning. I'm going to bed now." "What? But this is our last chance to do something together." "Yes, but there's still in the morning for goodbyes, and I can see that I'm not needed where we are walking." Tajar nodded his head toward the tent they were approaching, the chief's tent, Chalet's tent. Alam had not consciously headed there, but was moving towards it anyway. Tajar clapped Alam on the back and walked away. "In the morning, then," said Alam. "If you're lucky," smiled Tajar. Alam took a deep breath and walked up to the tent. A warm glow and flickering shadows came from within. People were still awake. 5 or so paces before reaching the door of the tent, it was opened by Chief Urlach, who looked at Alam with a stony face. "Chief Urlach," Alam began. "I knew you would come tonight, Alam. Go home," the chief said firmly, but not unkindly. "May I speak with Chalet?" "No." Alam thought he heard muffled sobbing from inside the tent. "Please, Chief, I'd like to spend a few moments with my friend." "No, Alam, go home," the older man replied. "But it is the last night," Alam pleaded. "Last nights have a way of getting people pregnant." "No, that's not what I was thinking at all," protested Alam. "I believe you when you say that you weren't thinking. In my experience, young men usually don't." "It's not like that. Your daughter is safe with me." "Even if you keep your word, her reputation would be tarnished by walking around with you late at night. She cannot afford that, so close to her being presented as a bride." "But nothing will happen," said Alam. "True, nothing will happen because she stays inside tonight, and you will spend your final night in our clan in your own bed. Go home." Alam could tell there was no changing the older man's mind. I could push past him. He would stop me. I could call out. She would come. No, she wouldn't. I can return later and make a slit in the tent and she can sneak out of it. Only the lowest of men would destroy someone's shelter for their own selfishness. Alam refused to let himself sleep that night. Once dawn gave enough light to illuminate the tent, he started packing his possessions. It did not take long, for he owned little more than a few changes of clothing, a cooking pot, horse tack, flint, leather traveling sack, bedding, his weapons, and new armor. Not counting his weapons, all his worldly possessions fit snugly into 2 saddlebags. "It's not a lot to show for 20 summers," Alam murmured. "My boy," Kelazar replied, "you are so much more than these trivial things. You also take with you a wealth of love and memories. They are a treasure that no thief can steal." "Yes," he agreed, "that is true." He felt a numb sort of detachment as he pushed the tent flap open. Out in the camp, everyone was busy preparing to move. Tents were coming down, boxes and sacks were being loaded onto carts and the backs of the small, nimble horses that the people of the plains used. He helped Kelazar dismantle their tent and load it onto the cart. He then deposited his possessions outside the corral and set off to see Tajar. "Sorry, Alam," Tajar's mother said when he asked her if Tajar was home. "He left early this morning. He is probably collecting the traps for our journey." "He could have waited," grumbled Alam. "We could have done it together." "Please ask him to join me at the corral when he returns." The woman held his hands kindly. "Alam, it is possible that he will not return until you're gone. Not everyone is able to say goodbye with grace. Some prefer to simply avoid it. Surely not. Tajar and I have been friends forever, and last night he was very calm, not even sad, said Alam. Tajar is complicated, Alam. He thinks and feels deeply, but likes to hide it behind jokes and teases. I'm sure he'll come back in time, muttered Alam as he walked away. He did not. The camp was packed. The only indication that the clan's tents had once been there were circles of dirt and dead grass. Ropes on the carts were being checked, while horses stamped impatiently. Some people had already mounted their horses and were ready to set off. Alam approached the head carts and horses. Chalet sat straight-backed on her compact horse. She was finally alone. Her parents were walking amongst the rest of the clan, ensuring that everyone was ready to travel. It was the moment he had been watching for all morning. But now that an opportunity had arrived, he did not know what he wanted to say. He walked next to her and stroked the mane of her mare. Farewell, Chalet. Farewell, Alam. Her face was grim. She kept her gaze away from his eyes. I wish I had more time. Me too. Then maybe I could have convinced your father to change his mind, said Alam. About the banishment? Yes, and other things, like marrying you off. Her eyes swung to him. Why? What would you do? An urgency was kindled in his blood. This was his only chance. He stepped closer and lowered his voice. His eyes locked onto hers. I would tell him that you're too good for me, but that I would do anything to be worthy of your hand. I would tell him that you're the most wonderful person in the world. I would tell him that even though I have many flaws, that I would make you a good husband, that I would bring you happiness like no one else can, and that I would give my life to provide for you and protect you. Not that you need much protection, he finished with a small smile. Why do you say this now? A note of anger mixed with the dampness around her eyes. It's too late. You should have said this before we went on the raiding trip. It might have meant something then. Now these words do nothing but cause pain. I had to tell you my heart. But why? Now I will always wonder if you would have been a better husband than the man my father finds for me. Alam moved closer. Come with me, he whispered fiercely. If not now, then tonight, once everyone is asleep, we can meet up and be together forever. She paused momentarily. I can't. Even though it is what I want, more than anything. Last night, if you had said this, I would have run away with you right then. But now I see that it can't be. If you examine yourself, you'll see that I'm right. Think of the pain we would cause to others. And my father would send Sarek after us. We wouldn't get far. And even if we did, we'd weaken our clan and expose them to even more danger. I could not live with the shame of that. I do not think you could either. And what of children? How would we protect any children without the help of our friends and family? The plains are too big and dangerous for us to survive on our own. So, said Alam, we just say farewell and forget about each other? Yes. She nodded, even though I never will. Alam moved closer. May I at least kiss you to say farewell? You know I can't. People would see and then talk and then wonder if there was anything more than just a kiss. It would ruin all chances of me getting a good husband, she sighed. Alam heard footsteps approaching from behind. Alam, it is time for you to go, said the chief. His eyes darted from Alam to Chalet. I know, Chief Urlach, but Tajar's not back from collecting his traps. I'd like to see him before I leave. No. You leave now and must never enter our lands again. Alam clenched his jaw and willed himself not to cry. Farewell, he said. Farewell, replied Chalet. One final hug from Kalazar, one final wave of farewell to his friends, and it was done. He mounted his large gray mare and pointed her out of the abandoned camp. She fought the rains, but begrudgingly carried him north, towards the river, and away from the only life he had known. He looked frequently over his shoulder to catch Chalet's returned glance, and to look for Tajar. All too soon, he was too far away to make out which dot on the horizon was the woman he loved. The river took a turn and passed behind a long, low hill. By the time he came out the other side, the only sign of his life among the Impa clan was the cloud of dust that they left behind as they traveled east. He was alone. The vastness of the endless plains swallowed him.